Hello, greetings. This is the man in the shack again. In this fifth video, I would like to take a look at the metadata file that I'd created and go through some of the different parts of it and talk about why some of these things are here and what we can do with them and what's going to be expanded and what this is useful for and that sort of thing. Um, so I mentioned this in a previous video. The best way to get to it is to go to the actual character pool page here in Steam. In the description, yeah, I guess that's what it is. In the description, there's a link down here. Goes right to it. Boom. Takes you there. And there are 3 sheets. This is a normal Google sheet, Excel, a spreadsheet. I'll call it Excel because I think of it as Excel, but it's Google Sheets. There are I've got 3 parts to it right now, maybe more. Main part is character map. There's a list of the mods that I actually use, and I sort of keep track of it here and some other stuff. And then there's just some sort of, another sheet. It's just ideas and stuff. The main part, the part that actually matters, is the character map. I began this thing just to sort of keep track of things as I went, and I was adding data to it as I went. And I'm a data person. That's what I do for a living. And it was sort of natural that I would create this sort of tool. To talk about this and how it works, there are a number of fields that are for just strictly for indexing, partly for my own purposes and partly because indexing is important. This first bit we can think of as like a file name or a file number, a file index. I have separated it into pieces. There are a number of G, G.I. Joe, right? And so there are 134 of those going up through 1990. Then there are 6 October Guard, that's OG. There are 6 Mask, which is M. There are, let's see, about 20 Cobras, which is C. CT is a sort of a subset of Cobras, that is Cobra Troopers. And then there's D for the Dreadnoks, V for Venom, I for Independent, which is just regular other characters and so forth. So there's 211 characters in here altogether at this point. Now, that's, if you look here in columns D and E, you see included in plant, some of them are not marked in either. Those are people that I have not yet decided whether or not I even want to pursue doing them. Everything, really everything, up through 84 is already done actually. 85, there's only a few left. 86 and 87, all that stuff's going to get done. Even though 87 is where it started kind of coming apart. There's specifically Battle Force 2000. Man, I thought it was so stupid. I thought it was stupid. I didn't. I like it. It seemed so derivative of. It was like Devastator, right? It was like the Constructicons, right? You had all the vehicles and they would put together, and it's like. They wanted Voltron and G.I. Joe, or years later, you would have called it a Megazord. I didn't like that. It belonged in the Transformers. It didn't belong in G.I. Joe. And they were generic characters that hardly ever got used. Ended up getting all killed off at once, which I think Larry Hama probably felt about them the same way I did. But he had to use them. Eventually, they let him kill people, and he and he killed he killed the entire team, but for one guy all at one time. So that was wouldn't normally cheer a G.I. Joe getting killed, but I thought that was funny. I've got anyway, that's how they're, that's how they're going, and included in planned. There's some guys. Oh, like frostbite needs to be put over there. We already did him. Uh, some guys definitely they're going in. They don't have the things for them yet. Toll booth. There's not really a good construction hat yet, so I can't make an effective toll booth until I do. But I want him cross country. I'll make him soon. Lift ticket again with the helmet. Helmet doesn't work. Sergeant Slaughter is one that I really want to make. I mean, I do actually want to make Sergeant Slaughter, but there is no effective hat yet. So at some point, I'm sure there will be. Anyway, and by the way, I will make the Battle Force 2000 guys just because I want to kill them. So anyway, back to indexing. Oh well, that's actually a good a good. Let's talking about Battle Force 2000. I have this thing here, faction, which is part of the indexing, I guess, in that it is well, I've got it to where this is I can show like sub teams and so forth. So I did label all the Battle Force 2000 guys so that I can keep them, yeah, even DJ, and so they're so they're all labeled as sort of a faction, as a sub faction inside the thing. Really, it's more for down here where I'm saying October Guard, Mask, Cobra. You know, that's giving the elaboration on the the bit in the alpha portion of the index. Okay, so code name is what we generally think of them as, but they've also got a first and last name, right? Which so first, last, and code name all together, those three fields are unique. Actually, first and last are unique. Everybody must have a first. Everybody must have a last. There's some of them. Well, yeah, there's some guys that I just haven't filled it in for, but anybody that gets made, they got to have a first. They got to have a last. And the code name is not necessary. You could have a blank code name. There's some people that probably will. Although in those cases, I've been doing things like you know. Well, a character that I've planned but haven't made yet is Professor Fred Appel, who was, instrumental in the creation of Cobra Island. Is a particular Crimson Guardsman, and he doesn't have a code name, but I can call him Professor because that's what he was. So, I'm playing fast and loose with the code names in that sense. When it comes to things that that aren't clear. Okay, so I've labeled each of them as the year. That's just sort of extra information, but that is sort of how that's how they're sorted. This is all in year order, followed by alphabetically by code name. So Breaker through Zap, then Ace through Wild Bill, then Blowtorch through Thunder. That's the first 3 years worth. The last bit of the indexing is this column over here, R, where I have just marked down. There's particular guys that have that belong on in particular environments, right? Ace and Airborne, they are pilots, right? So their environmental is sky, snow jobs in the cold, torpedoes in the sea, and so forth. Cutter deep 6 sea. There's Wild Bill in the sky, and then there are sort of biome-based things: jungle, desert, right? And then just a general wilderness, right, for people like Spirit and Outback, and then sometimes a particular thing like poisonous or burning an effect that's airtight or barbecue, right? Alpine vertical maps, right? That's like I need him climbing things, and this has no effect on the game other than if you want to have some, like, maybe you wanted to have all the pilots work together or something. I don't know. It's just something, just a field that I thought to put in there. But I would kind of throw that in there with with the rest of the indexing subgroups, right? That's all that stuff. So the next sort of category that we're going to look at is the roles, and that's these 4 columns here. And this is, kind of a sore spot with me about how it works. I'm hoping that a mod will come out that allows this. This reserve is something that I've just made up. The idea is that it is not any of the other three. I explained this before, but I don't want them to be a soldier. The only one I ever want to be a soldier is John Q. Public, the rookie, because anytime because I've got a pool with like 80 of them in there. I put, and every time I want it to be that same guy over and over again, because he's going to get replaced. I'm using load from character pool. I'm not getting random guys. I'm getting known guys, and so he's the rookie. He's the only soldier. I take that's not exactly true. The Battle Force 2000 guys, I've got them set as rookies too. I want them to show up. There's a game. I've got a mini game sort of planned with those guys, because what I want to do is make it to where they like they're mixed in with the random soldiers, so you sort of collect all 6 of them over the course of the thing by getting them as randoms, and then if once you do, you can take all 6 of them out on a mission, and if you can play that mission and get and get the only one to walk out of there is Maverick, then you win. How about that? That's a good idea. That's soldier is just those guys, right? And then when we get down to it would just be that. So really, for all intents and purposes, because those guys aren't even in there yet, it's just the rookie. The VIPs, what I've got marked here is people that could logically be back at the base doing stuff. People whose role is more support staff or strategic or things like that. So the people that are on this list, well, Grunt, because later on in the comic series he literally became an engineer, and he left the team and went to school and became an engineer, and that's so. I mean, that's pretty much a no-brainer. Hawk, because he's the leader, he might very well just be back at the base. I always think of I am Hawk, right? I the player am Hawk, right? So it doesn't not in the field, VIP. Doc, of course, can't be in the field. He can only be, he really should be in the AWC. Tripwire is a tech guy who, a lot of times he could be, he could be manning the computers back at the base, that type of thing. Cutter generally was running things from inside his hovercraft rather than from being in the field. So, that's one thing. Deep Six, again, he's got kind of a clunky suit to be running around, right? I can sort of see him doing stuff back at the base, maybe. I don't know. Airtight, another one of the nerds. Keelhaul, another one of the officers. Tollbooth, not so much of a fighter, but a guy with a sledgehammer is a guy who should be cleaning out alien debris. Dial Tone, another one of the nerd herd. Lifeline, just like Doc. Mainframe, nerd herd. Sergeant Slaughter, his job was actually as trainer, so he could conceivably be kind of one of the bosses back at the place too. Chuckles is intelligence. Hardtop is like Tollbooth. Payload is like those guys also. Psych Out is also intelligence like Chuckles. And then Dragonsky from the October Guard is you could sort of count him as a science guy too, maybe. And then Dark VIP. I've got Storm Shadow here amongst the G.I. Joes marked as a Dark VIP, because depending on how you want to think of it, he might have, he could sort of be a Cobra if you like. He technically started out that way. And then basically I've just got like every Cobra is a Dark VIP. All of these guys. And then down when we get into the independents, then it's it's kind of who's what, right? Somebody like like Storm Shadow, another Wade Collins from the comic book. He depending on which part of the continuity you want to look at, he was either a bad guy or he was a good guy. So it's yeah. Okay. That's the roles. The next one is the Tumblr. This is just each one of these is a link to the that guy's page on the Tumblr gallery as I do it. So here's Breaker, right? That's his page, and I'm just filling those in sort of as I go. Those are the ones that I've done. That's not quite all of them I've done, but anyway, that's those will eventually get filled in, and that's sort of how I keep track of who I haven't done as I do more of them. And that's that. Then the next bit is the classes. I have two columns that I've sort of reserved for this. And the way I think of it is that when I first started out, of course, there were no mod classes. So I had to just say, given if we just only have four classes, what is everybody, right? And so I was thinking about it like, well, of course, Breaker's a specialist and so forth. And Clutch, I was like thinking, okay, a vehicle is like, one of the, like a huge thing, so that's going to be the Grenadiers and so forth. Flash, the sharpshooter. Grand Slam, my idea with Grand Slam was that he should use a baseball bat. He's one of the least interesting characters ever. In the thing, it just hardly ever got used. I thought he was cool. He was cool in the very beginning of the comics. He did it. He was in a couple of stories, and it was like he was kind of an ass kicker. And So I thought Ranger, you put a bat in his hand, Grand Slam with a name like that. They never anything about it in the file card or anything, but they had the bat mod. Somebody made that, and that's how I use him. That's Grand Slam, and then going through them like that, there were I just put use that sort of logic and put each person into a thing, uh, and that's this column. This column is what I've been putting my mind towards lately, and this is what I like much better. I have been testing stuff and messing around with different classes. I'll probably show some of that here in another video, or another couple of videos about getting guys to work closer to, like, well, eventually the idea is that each guy will really really feel like that guy and will play like that guy would play. And there's not enough variation within the vanilla classes for that, so you have to look outside. And in the end, I'm not so interested in being able to fill out every part of every class as I am having the guys feel right. I'm not trying to min max. I'm trying to characterize. So they're not going to be as you know pumped up, or as like as synergistic, always as they might be. Right. I'm going for a different feel. With that, the I've I've gone to a great length, not a great length. I've gone to lengths to make this list, and this is I'm feeling like a pretty good list. I've started going chronologically, and I'm working through another campaign. I threw away the thing that I was working on again, and started over with with a few other different things, and I'm trying to just like work through chronologically. Basically, I'm building all the 1982 guys, and I'm going to get them all set, and then I'm going to build the 1983 guys, and I get them all set, and I've got it's a like I got to play a little fast and loose with it here at the first, but it's now that I've got the guerrilla tactics school, and you can just start training people in the things that you need to fill in. Right now, I'm training Breaker because I had gotten a bunch of there's like 15 classes, right? So you get rookies, you get a bunch of rookies, they go out, they get classed. Well, I mean, you get one specialist out of the bunch. That's the downside to it. But at the same time, I'm just filling them in, and the idea is not like who do I get when? It's like I want to get them all, right, and then have them all, and then be able to pick and choose and say, now that I've got the entire team, I can move forward. So there are, so now I'm looking at it as what is each guy really, right? Breaker, specialist, clutch. The trooper made more sense than the grenadier, right? He's clutch is a I'll go through each guy in a little more depth, inside the character pool at a different time. But this is kind of where this is sitting, and I've got most of them done, up through the guys that I care about. Like I said, in 1987, you see it started to peter out. By 1989, it's really just gone. There's only a couple of guys after that I like, and then the Cobras. I haven't the other parts of it. I'm mostly concentrating on the Joes right now. So that's this will eventually all be filled out, I suppose. Before I call this all done, it's gonna all be filled out. Maybe that'll take a long time. I don't know. And then I just sort of have a note here that's generally sort of a note to myself about either something odd about the guy or some way that it needs to be approached or whatever. Something like what did I do? I did this earlier. Tripwire. The I think that I want him to be a shock troop, the one that has the flamethrower on it, which I got that for blowtorch, but tripwire, um, there's a lot of that class that would make sense for him because he needs to move around quickly and get from place to place, but he needs to be using mines, not fire. And so the way I was thinking of it is at a certain level, you can just say, okay, let's class him that way, and then just use like, like what in, like a net hack, you would call it a conduct, where you just decide not to use something, and you play that way as if you're not going to. And so with Tripwire, when I play him, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make him a shock troop, and I'm just never, ever, ever going to use the flamethrower with him because Tripwire doesn't carry a flamethrower. But as soon as the Andromedan is, autopsy's done and I get proximity mines, well, I'm going to load him up with those, and I'm not going to load him up, and I'm not going to load those on anybody else. Lightfoot, I guess, but but Tripwire's not going to, like, I just want him to do his job. I don't want him to be a generic troop. So I probably will just hold off on using Tripwire for a long time until until the mines are there. So that's that's what notes is for. It's and that's just kind of like a lot of this is just junk. It's notes to myself or whatever, and some of it's outdated. Okay, so that was the classes. Oh yeah, okay. So the next piece is, and of course, I've got it on freeze panes here, so we just stick with the index and the code name over here. But okay, so the next piece. Ooh, okay. So now we've got their gear, and this is hardly filled out as you can see, but more so that I just wanted to establish the fields and understand that we have a recommended primary weapon, a recommended secondary weapon, a recommended armor. I would think at the top of the tier, right? It's like, I had this idea that that the power armors, the exo and the war armors and so forth, are going to sort of sub as vehicles, so that Clutch would have an exosuit. I may do that. I haven't decided yet. I don't know if that's going to be my final recommendation for Clutch. I'm going to try different things and see how it feels. I keep hoping that at some point somebody, they'll mod it somehow, or they'll, actually change the game so that we can use vehicles. I'll tell you what, I'll be a happy camper on that day, and Clutch's job description is going to change right up to driver, like it should be. So, and then util A and util B, I've got, for instance, something that needs to be there. In particular, Stalker must have the med kit because of his job, and so just like because of the way that you know, I guess I must, of course, he doesn't have to, but I mean, in the recommended way, Stalker would have a med kit because he's trained as a medic. And Snake Eyes, here's a great example. I pretty much had filled out Snake Eyes because Snake Eyes is actually, as for as crazy as it is, he's just a ranger. He's like a vanilla. He's a ranger, and like there's no crazy thing that we had to do to him. I'm generally looking at it as like the guys who have swords or rangers. So you got the ninjas. There's other ninja classes and stuff that I've played around with, but I don't know. The samurai class has been recommended. I'm going to try that with Quick Kick. But with Snake Eyes, I really like the Ranger build. And so, especially if you give him the submachine gun, which gives you an extra movement point, and the katana, which also gives you an extra movement point. So Snake Eyes, with this little bit, with the SMG and the katana, really feels like Snake Eyes. He's faster than all the others. He can, and then he's a ranger. We give him Phantom, right? You give him Phantom, you give him Shadow Step, you give him Running Gun. These are all things that are Snake Eyes-y. He could, right? He's gonna get right up on you before he sees you. Then then he's gonna dodge some bullets with the Shadow Step, and then he's gonna run and gun because he can do he can do a bunch of stuff at once because he's a ninja. And then you get up to the higher ones, the Major and Colonel, Untouchable, and Reaper. These are some guys are going to have ones that are that really feel right to them, and some guys are going to have like different things. There's going to be ones that there's going to be parts to it that don't matter so much, right? I think Untouchable and Reaper, we could probably Implacable, Untouchable, and Reaper. In fact, those things, I'm not, I could be persuaded, right? Phantom, Shadow Step, and Run and Gun, I really think those are Snake Eyes, though. So, in the end, what I want to have is this sort of stuff, this recommended gun, recommended utility items, recommended armor, and then the recommended build, filled out for each guy in such a way that, I could say this is it, and maybe I'll probably that's a good idea. What I'm going to do is eventually probably color these things in such a way that says like some color will suggest that hey this one's really important, and then some other color would say this is just kind of what I have. Oh yeah, the other thing is the AWC perks. I've decided on my version at least that I'm going with choosable AWC perks, just because I, well, they're part of the build, they're part of the guy, and I'm not trying to min max the thing. I'm not going to recommend an AWC that's going to break the game. I'm trying to make it to where that each guy is the thing, and I may get that is the right way, and I may give them some AWC that makes them weaker, or is not going to give them some obvious advantage, right? Like, well, take Snake Eyes, right? Phantom and Shadow Step are not synergistic, right? With Phantom, I should I should use the strike from shadows thing or whatever it's called, the shadow strike, is that what it's called? That's the one that synergizes with Phantom, but Shadow Step makes more sense to me for Snake Eyes because he can get up, well, because it makes more sense. He would be able to dodge, well enough to be able to get up close to somebody to get him with a sword, and that I wanted more than a crit bonus. That makes more sense. It makes it feel more Snake Eyesy. So, the last bit of this is this field mods, in which this is very out of date. But the idea here is that I'll list out the mods that are for each particular guy, just for information. So that's this. That's character map. Um, Looking at these other sheets really quickly, this is almost up to date. I had, oh, I can't sort it here, can I? Oh wait, can I? Yeah, sort. Oh, well, I'm not going to do that right now. I had just put down the order in which I had originally gotten them. The title of the map, full title, or full title of the mod. And then I've just sort of categorized them to myself. I've got classes. I've got game new content, cosmetic mods, the CP itself, or content, game mechanics, of which I've changed some of those out, interface mods, voices, and weapons. So, just about 100 mods. Not too bad. And I've added a few. And then I've just sort of, here I've just, with the class mods, I was just sort of listing out who I think each one is, right? I was looking at the rogue and I was thinking, who plays like Stalker, right? Because I'm convinced that this is correct. And who else is like that? Well, Spirit's like that. Tunnel Rat is like that. Hit and Run and Ambush. These guys all would play like a rogue. There's also... I've started using the escalation classes, which gives me Rocketeer and Scout so far. And Scout is very much like Rogue. I got escalation because I wanted the Rocketeer, because I realized that's what Zap is. Zap and Bazooka and Fast Draw, they're not Grenadiers, they're Rocketeers. They shouldn't have a cannon, they shouldn't have the giant gun, they should have a thing that fires rockets instead of grenades. And so I got the escalation classes for that because that's the only place so far that I think that is. And then there's scouts, which are like rogues except they use the sword instead of the pistol. So they're like somewhere between a regular ranger and a rogue. And that's a nice sweet spot for somebody like Grand Slam, who's not really a ranger but does need to use not the sword but the bat, like I was talking about, right? So I for a long time I struggled with where should Grand Slam go, and I think it's perfect. Sneak Peek is a scout. Outback is somebody else that I want using a blade. And then Muskrat for sure. When there's a machete, I don't think there's a machete, but when there's a machete instead of a thing, well, by gosh, I need that to be Muskrat. He should. I don't know that I want him to be a ranger. My only non-ninja ranger so far is Recondo. I'm still kind of struggling with all of this. I'm still kind of going back and forth on these things, and these may not be the final recommendations and stuff. But like I said, this is just me taking notes for myself. Speaking of me taking notes for myself, I did this. This is all, it's in the sheet, so it's publicly available. You can go through here and read it. But really, this is just me thinking to myself about stuff that's, making lists of things. Particular maps. These are things within G.I. Joe continuity that would make sense as maps. I sort of listed out the different countries, the different fictitious countries that Larry Hama used in the comics. And then just lists of things that are ideas that are, things that we don't have, Sergeant Hat for Sergeant Slaughter, etc. And then just different things going into broader ideas of what's going to happen when there's more stuff, when long war type stuff comes out, or when things have really expanded. It's like we're still in early days in terms of like what's going to get modded and what's going to happen. There's 2-3 more rounds of DLC to come out, so there's lots of room left to go. So anyway, that's all of this. The character pool, or the character map, important part of this. Oh, the most important part. the reason to have this, the reason that anybody who's using this character pool would want to have this document open is this right here, because when you're using load from character pool, you have to write down that you have to change their first and last name, and it's got to be spelled correctly, and it's got to be case sensitive. So I think it's case sensitive. So yeah, you better make sure that you know that Raphael is Rafael when it's Rafael Melendez, and that you better know that you better know how to spell Etienne. That's not something that you would have on the tip of your tongue often, or on the tip of your keyboard, I guess. To say, I know what the guy's name is, and I can't remember if there's two T's and two N's. So keeping this document is, a way of being able to use that mod, the load from character pool mod, without having to scribble it down on a piece of paper to think. I was like, gosh, how do you spell freestat? And then have to go and write that down, right? So that's, so here's all your first and last names, and have fun with it. And I'm going to cut this off now, and I'll talk about the next thing in the next one.